Hey guys, welcome back to the Long Game Podcast. Today I'm going to be joined by Pat, a triathlete in her mid 60s who just competed Oregon 70.3 with me, along with 2,500 ish of our closest friends in Salem this weekend. Later this year, she's going to be heading to Kona. So I want to pick her brain a little bit on, how she got there, what her early life was like as a triathlete coming into the sport. And we're also going to talk about aging as an athlete within our community, trying to stay in the long game, with proper sleep and recovery. And then we're going to dive into Oregon 70.3 and talk about how we did. It was a really awesome race this past weekend. I got to toe the line again with my close friend Joe Beckerly, and I got to see the family. And it's always good to be up there to spend time with Joe. So again, guys, this is the Long Game Podcast. And, we talk about outdoor sports, our lives as endurance athletes, and just being outdoors and having fun. So with that being said, I want to introduce my guest for this episode, Pat. So Pat, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this crazy sport.
Sure. Well, first of all, Mark, thanks for having me. This is exciting. I really appreciate the opportunity. Um, I've ever since I was probably a child, I did some sort of sport or activity. So I played tennis in college, and then during grad school, I got into running and doing marathons. And then I got an injury, and I was surrounded by some folks who did triathlons. I was
Mm,
working at the time at Oregon State, and they're like, this is just something that you should do. You should try it. You know how to swim. I had a good friend who was a bike racer, so he taught me how to ride, which at the time was my really least favorite of them, and really enjoyed the running part. So,
right.
it was just kind of fortuitous that I fell into it. And my intention is that I would come into the sport, and rehab a bit and go back to running marathons. And that just never happened. So I think maybe since that time in, gosh, it might have been 2010, 2011. I haven't really done any solo marathon, just marathoning. It's always been in
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
triathlon. So it's, I was just taken by the sport, the friendliness of the people, the challenge of it, mixing it up, being able to swim, being able to bike and run, and not just not just running every day. So it was, uh, it was really just, by luck that I got into it. And we happened to I lived in Corvallis, and we happened to have a tri store at the time. And so really got into the community and built friendships from that. So it was kind of the perfect storm.
Yeah. Now, was this
No.
in your early 20s, 30s? Around what age
No,
was
I
this?
didn't get into doing triathlons till probably it was my early 50s. So
Wow.
I was
Okay.
late. I was late to the game. So it was and even with coming in that late, I was around a lot of college students and other folks similar to my age. So it was, folks were very embracing and inclusive, and really helped me make that transition. All the little things you need to know that you don't really know at the time around this sport. Some of the questions you're it's like, who do I ask? This is kind of a strange question. And they just made it really easy. So
Um, so I started the sport probably around the same time that you did, right? This was maybe 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. So both my boys were born in 2007 and then 2008. And I think it was in the middle of uh, when they were born is kind of when I started hearing about triathlon. I had a buddy, uh, his uncle was in the hospital, and he would just happened to be visiting him. And what was on TV was the Ironman Championship, and this was back with like some of the old school guys that were still racing at that time. And his uncle goes, "Man, I wish I was healthy enough to be able to do something like that. That would have been really cool, to make sure that I took care of myself, right, to be able to do an Ironman." And so my friend took that to heart, and he's like, "Man, I wanna see what I can do." And at that time, like, he was 30 pounds overweight, he was still partying, pretty hard, and this is, like, our late 20s, and I think he might have still been a smoker at that time, but he could tell, like, he just was not, uh, living a healthy lifestyle. And sitting there with his uncle, he had realized that that was gonna be him, right, if he didn't make some pretty drastic changes. I think about 6 months from there, he had that surgery where it clears out your sinuses or something like that, 'cause he would snore, and his fiancée at the time was like, "You need to take care of that." So he got that surgery done, and that kind of, like, was the catalyst to, losing weight, stopping the smoking habit, and then starting to, like, slowly go from running into cycling, and then from the combination of those things going into swimming, and then eventually doing a triathlon. So I see him, like, over the weekend one day, and he's like, "Hey, dude, I'm doing this triathlon." And he knew that I was already biking and swimming like that. I mean, biking and running, those were things that I had done since I was a kid, and, was still continuing to do those things through college, and then through, like, the birth of my daughter, and then my 2 boys. So, was already on that train. And he goes, "What do you think about doing a triathlon?" I was like, "I don't know, dude. I'm not really I could be in the water for a good amount of time. I surf, but I'm not a swimmer." He was like, "No, it's easy. Just jump in the pool, and, you'll get the hang of it." So we both sign up for, Tri Rock San Diego, and this is like 2009 or 2010. And then something happens to where, like, I had a schedule conflict, wasn't able to do it. He does it, and then I see all the pictures and everything, and I'm like, I really missed out, right? So I really made a big effort to make sure that I do the next triathlon. My next triathlon after that was a beginner triathlon, because I had never done a swim, bike, run all together in one event, but I joined the Triathlon Club of San Diego, and I did the beginner triathlon, which is out here in Coronado. We have this little bay that's really, really safe. There aren't any waves or anything like that. Water is relatively flat and not super cold during that time. I think it's like late summer, but it's a mixture of like beginner adults, some kids, and just a mixture of people. So I'm pretty confident, like, on the bike and the run, right? And we get in the water, and I panic. Like, I thought I was gonna die in the first, like, 50 meters of that swim. I'm, like, backstroking, and I'm seeing these, like, little kids pass by me. I'm like, "Oh my god." I get out of the water almost, like, close to last, and my wife is like, she was with me. She's looking at me. She's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Dude, I almost died. I almost drowned in this little beginner 200-meter swim." Get out of the water, do the bike and the run, and then I'm like, "I'm never doing this again." And that was that was, like, in 2010. And then I ended up doing Tri Rock that year, sign up for a couple of other sprints, do a couple of Olympics, and then I did my first 70.3 at Vineman, 70.3, which is still, like, my favorite race. So if you ask me what my favorite race is, it's still Vineman 70.3. I love that race. And unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore, and that's part of the reason why I jumped back into the sport. I'm like, "We need to save this sport, especially the 70.3 venues." So,
Right.
yeah. But did you have kind of a similar, introduction into, 70.3 or triathlon just in general, or were you good, like, right off the
No,
bat?
no. I mean, my very first race, I couldn't get my bike shoe off. I was so nervous. So
Oh
I
my
was
god.
sitting there on the ground,
Yeah,
and I was pushing at that time I had it was some sort of thread thing or something, and I kept on pushing it the wrong way. So I must have spent 10 minutes in the I was like mortified. I was embarrassed. I was like, oh, and with my friend telling me how to get my shoe off. It wasn't a very pretty picture. But
yeah.
yeah, and well, they had a packed crust in Bend, and I had a similar experience, and the water was like 55 degrees. And
Oh
I
my
think
god.
this is
Yeah,
maybe my second, half Ironman. And, I thought I was a pretty confident swimmer. Like,
right.
I'd seen people get, kind of. panicked in the water, and I thought it's just because they weren't very good at swimming, or, that kind of thing that you tell yourself, and then it happened to me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." This I did the float on the back, swimming, backstroke, all of those things to just calm down, and so I had to it was a great lesson to learn early on that, little things can happen, and you just have to kind of wrap your head around it and relax and work through it. But yeah, when I got out, had the same kind of experience, even though I had, done some halves before. Is like, I'm not sure I can do this, So it kind of threw me for a while, but it was, so it was a good learning experience. I'm much more empathetic for
Yeah,
others that go through it, and it is about just learning more about yourself, and how you react to challenges in the moment, especially for me.
absolutely. I was just talking to another good friend of mine, Eric Chrisman, who owns a race series called what are it's the Elevated Race Series, and there are a bunch of trail runs. He also does gravel bike races and this trail duathlon that I do towards the end of the year in October. And we were just talking about how leaders and people at the top of their organizations, um, and coincidentally, Ironman just put something out where it said something like "train like a CEO," and it was an Ironman ad. Um, but I think there's a different perspective to it. It isn't a thing of just Ironman being such a kind of a type A personality type of sport. I think what you were just talking about, where you said that you're a lot more empathetic to to other athletes that are going through it for the first time. I think that's the real learning that a lot of leaders may be able to have, right? Experiencing an endurance event, whether it's a Ironman, ultra marathon, or whatever it is, because of the training, the sacrifice, the balancing of priorities as you're kind of moving towards this goal and making sure that nothing kind of falls through the cracks. And that's
Yeah.
really important. And again, you and I talked before we jumped onto the podcast about how, this sport has given us so much. It's given me a lot. And I want to make sure that like I leave this sport better than I found it. And one of the people that I wanna leave it to are my kids, right? Like, my son, I just signed him up for his first sprint, and the kid wants to do a 70.3 right away. He wants to do Oceanside. I'm like, "Oceanside is not the first 70.3 you wanna do, number 1. And then number 2, like, you've gotta go through the motions. It's not about being fast at first, right? It's going through "How the hell do I put my shoe in this cleat when my heart is going 180 beats per minute," right? Um so yeah, I really what you said really resonates with me for sure. Um, I I want to go back to your earlier days and how you like prepped for races in those earlier days. Did you work with a coach at the time, or did you join like a triathlon club to kind of get more acclimated to the sport and figure things out, or how did you go about your earlier experiences?
Yeah. So when I started, I was working at Oregon State. And so I was really fortunate in that they had a triathlon club.
Oh, very cool.
And it was
Okay.
very,
Yeah.
and it's still very active, and a very big club. So I had the benefit of that. So I'd swim in the mornings with the club. And then, I would kind of see what other folks were doing in terms of their training, and I think at the time I thought, well, I've, run a fair number of marathons. I can just improvise and I'll go out and ride on weekends,
Okay. Yeah.
because I thought I really knew what I was doing, but I really didn't. So the swim coach for the tri club at OSU was also, did personal coaching. So I thought, I'm just gonna, I think we're a really good fit, and we chatted several times. And so I worked with, Taz for a number of years. And so he really helped me initially with the foundation and the structure of training and what it, and what it takes and kind of the rhythm of it. And so that was a really, really good fit. And then moved on from there, and I tried to do coaching just by myself,
Mhm.
it's like, "Oh, I've got all of these past workouts, and I'll
Right.
just copy them, and, I'll follow it." And, that probably worked for a short period of time, but I really missed that interaction with having a coach, someone who was kind of saying, you probably can go a little bit harder or to cut back or, kind of what's going on. So then I went back and went into got another personal coach, and that worked out again very well. And, it's all I think a lot of it for me has been about the match. I'm pretty self-driven, so I don't need an extra layer because sometimes that
Mhm.
makes it a little bit
Mhm.
too much for me.
Right. Right.
And so, it has the opposite effect of what I'm sure the intention really is. And so that worked out really well, and then she retired, and I thought, "Okay, now I've really been doing this for a long period of time. I've really mastered how to do this by myself." And it just didn't, I knew within a very short period of time. So then Joe became, my coach, and that's also just been an excellent fit for me,
Yeah.
especially for, where I'm at and what I wanted to do, and so I couldn't be happier. I've been really fortunate that I've had folks in my life that, these last however many years that have really helped me structure and get a good sense of, how I work best and how I can be better. And so it's been really fortunate. For me, it makes a difference. It'd be hard for me, I think, at this point to say that I could just do it on my own. So,
Yeah.
I haven't been able to successfully do it, um, in the way that I like to, so.
Yeah, that's a really good reflection. I I don't know if Joe had mentioned that Joe and I owned a gym together, a triathlon coaching business together, and we were open for I think it was like 7 years almost, 6 or 7 years. And over that 6 or 7 years, and then even prior to that, I had coached a bunch of athletes. So I wanna say I had written hundreds of training plans, but I cannot coach myself. And when I write a training plan for myself, I very rarely give myself, like, the room um, to make mistakes, right? And then to be compassionate with myself, and I think that's a lot of what coaches, offer, right? It is the compassion. It is making those adjustments for when we have life events that are going on. And then to also, like you were talking about, that extra motivation. We're all, doing crazy stuff. Like a 70.3 to a normal person. If you try to talk to them, their eyes just roll back to the back of their head, right? And they're like, "What are you talking about?" My boss just recently said that. She goes, "Why are you here today?" I showed up to work on Tuesday, and she's like, "You did all that and you're here at work?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Um, but I cannot coach myself. Like I've tried it even for this
Yeah.
race, and we talked about it a little bit earlier before we jumped on. You know, I didn't have any lead up races going into this. My last race was um triathlon was a Washington 70.3. And I think the learning coming out of this race is I need a couple of setup races to kind of get my, gear in order, to get my mindset where it needs to be. And it's not that I'm trying to win the race, but it definitely makes the experience of going through all of the motions a little bit more fluid and just becoming more efficient. Now that my son is getting into it, I'm like kind of perfect timing, right? Like he's kind of getting me motivated to stay sharp, right? But I do think that I need to start working within a community again, and then even maybe even working with a coach, like because like I said, I can't coach myself very well, and even the training plan this time around, similar to what you did, I kind of pulled together a training plan that worked for me in the past and didn't work for me this time because I had a bunch of interruptions. My daughter graduated from college this year, and there were just a bunch of things that were going on kind of throughout the spring leading into the early summer, and I want to say not missed, but I had to adjust like 6 to 7 of my weekends. And like the weekends is kind of like those are the key workouts that we need to put in. But given that, I think I still had a pretty decent race. So, um, but lessons learned, right? Like I know that I need to, work with somebody. I'll probably be, hitting a Joe pretty soon. So,
Right? It's just,
yeah, yeah,
it's just it's a little bit like life, right? I mean, at least for me, I tend to work better in a team or with
hmm
colleagues than to
yeah,
be just
yeah,
by myself and doing things on my own. That the outcome always seems to be better
yeah,
in that
for sure.
regard. So it's there's some certainly some transferable uh, beha- learnings and behaviors in that goes across just more than sports for sure. At least for me, and I
Yeah,
think also for others.
yeah, 100%. Um, I do want to start to get into Oregon 70.3 and your preparation for that race, and then we'll go into Kona in a bit. But Oregon 70.3. So you live in Oregon. This is how many times have you done Oregon 70.3?
So I think this is the sixth time I've done it
Wow.
since uh,
Yeah.
the initial race. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I live in Salem, so it's kind of my
Yeah.
home
Yeah.
base.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so I'm really fortunate in that regard because it's so well run and it's the venue uh is just sweet in terms of
Oh,
a
it's
downriver
beautiful.
swim.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bike, is
Yeah.
I think I know every little pothole that's not filled in, and, uh, and then the run is just for I run every weekend, so it was fun to do it with that many more people,
Yeah. For
for
sure.
sure.
So you've done it 6 times. This is where you train. Somebody asked me over the weekend what my least favorite part of this last weekend's triathlon was. And to be honest with you, I couldn't tell him. I was like, there wasn't a least favorite. If anything, maybe it was the run in a way, even though it was like beautiful and it was serene. Like that's a normal run that I would probably run on the weekend. But during a race, I would have liked to hear and see more people. So that was the only thing that criticism that I had. But it was also kinda cool. It's just to be in your zone, right?
Yeah,
And to get the miles, like, just tick away the miles as you kinda went. So, and
yeah.
then the loop isn't great, but again, it was most of it is in the shade. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And it stays kinda warm in that shade, there's just not a lot of airflow, but it's still some folks are like, "Oh, it's all in the shade," and I'm like, "Well, you might
yeah,
get a little warm," but,
yeah, yeah.
especially that last mile back
Oh
where
my god. Yeah,
right? Then you have to
yeah,
go uphill and that,
yeah.
but, that's what
Yeah.
makes it, it is an Ironman, so but yeah, it's gorgeous.
It is, it is. Uh, so a lot of people don't know the format of 70.3. My sister is a teacher and she listens to this podcast along with a bunch of her coworkers, a bunch of teachers listen to this podcast, and they're all very interested, right, in triathlon and endurance sports. So just for my sister Sarah and uh, her friends out there, the 70.3 race that we had just done, it's a 1.2-mile swim, 56-mile bike ride, and then a 13.1-mile run, so a half marathon to finish it all up. But before we even start this race, there's a 1.5-mile walk from the transition area, which is where we swim out, all the way to the swim start. My wife on Saturday in her, um, she was wearing not sneakers, some sandals, I think. I didn't know that it was going to be a 1.5 mile walk and kind of rolling, on the way there. And so she's in her sandals walking with me and Joe. We get to the swim start and she's not happy. She's just like, "You guys are assholes. You made me walk all the way here." And she just like jets back right to the transition. But it I think it makes it more interesting that we have that like mile-and-a-half walk all the way to the swim start. Um, because you witness the whole like rainbow of different perspectives on how people are feeling about the race. There were people that were super nervous, there were people that were excited, people that were they didn't look like they even wanted to get in the water.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to kind of see that. And then lining up for the race, it was like, I'm sure you've been at Disneyland, it was like waiting for a line or waiting for a ride at Disneyland. It was, shoulder to shoulder. And I was trying to get up to the front, kind of where Joe was, and I didn't make it all the way up there. And that I think in itself is pretty interesting because you do wanna see yourself appropriately, but at the same time, you don't wanna be kind of truly seated where you would seed yourself in a normal, like, 70.3 race where I'm usually a 35 to 40-minute swimmer, and that's usually where I would start, probably closer to the 40-minute to give myself a little bit more room. In this event, I seated myself. I think I was right at the front of the 30 to 35. So I jumped in with swimmers that I thought were gonna be much faster than I was, and they still were. Where did you seed yourself kind of in the swim, chute?
Kind of in that same range as you did. Yeah, because I usually swim probably 35 in just like a lake swim or so, maybe just depending on the day, maybe a little bit slower, maybe a little bit faster, but
Yeah. Right,
um
right.
yeah, but it is a bustle to get up there more towards the front. I also thought, it's gonna be a little warm, so I don't wanna be out there when it gets really hot, because 'cause I've just kind of waited around because I thought, well, it's a chip swim, it's gonna be fast, and I'll just kinda hang out in the back, and that, you know, that only works so well for so long, and so it was nice, and I'd been down the river, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, so once I got in, I kind of, like, knew right where to catch that current that just kind of takes you
Yeah.
downstream and whips you
It
around
does.
the corner, and there you go. So, which is it in and of itself is really kind of fun. It's like a ride at Disneyland or something for a swimmer. But yeah, so it's good. But that walk is it's just an interesting, kind of view of people or humanity as folks are, "Oh, I need to put on my wetsuit," and they've
Yeah. Yeah.
waited too long, or it's just, and all the nerves that just kind of pop up along the way, and being able to chat with people that you normally would
Yeah.
never have the
No.
opportunity to, kind of hearing their story. It's amazing when we all get together what we share, and you know kind of people talk about their life a little bit, which is really interesting.
It is really interesting, and, I've done a lot of these at this point, and, usually the race starts at the airport is what I say, right? The race starts
Yeah.
at the airport. It's so funny, like, who's going to the race because they're the first to try to get on the airplane, first to try to get off the airplane, try to get their bike and their luggage. And we
Yeah.
don't talk, right? Like, we don't I try to, lighten the mood a little bit sometimes when I do see people like, "Hey, it's your first time," or whatever, but they are so locked in, and then you get to the swim start transition, and then people are just like, "Oh my god." There was a girl right next to me on my rack, and it did look like it might have been her first or second time doing a 70.3, but she's trying to fill up her tires. And by the third or fourth pump that she tried, she was like, I don't know. I just can't figure it out. Like, I've done this like so many times. And I go, let me take a look. I have an electric pump with a digital monitor on it. Let me see what's going on. So I put mine on, And the first thing I noticed is she didn't unscrew her little valve.
Yeah,
And I'm like, that's what happens, right? Like race
right.
morning is you just lose your mind and you
Yeah.
forget how to do like some of the more like simple things. Um, but yeah, the swim was interesting, and I think one of the things that Joe pointed out amongst the 6 or 7 other things on the swim was to swim towards the other shore for maybe a couple hundred meters and then let the current take you. But I overswam it. So I ended up hitting the other shore and like my hands were actually grabbing rocks. So I had to make a
Jeez.
quick, right turn. Yeah. And my other issue was that I was wearing somewhat clear goggles. And
No.
so when I would sight, I was getting hit right in the face with the sun. And so it was a little bit of a challenge for me to swim, to know where I was going, like with the swim, even though I knew the current was taking me back to the swim exit. All right, Pat, we were just finishing talking about the swim, and I had mentioned that I had swam a little bit too far across the river and I started grabbing rocks, and then kind of course corrected. But as I was course correcting, the sun was like straight in my face. So it was a little bit of a weird first time swim at Oregon for me. I think with you and Joe, having the experience that you have, like you could probably swim that swim like blindfolded at this point, right?
Until that last, right-hand turn by the buoy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Which
yeah,
even there, like once you see that big tree, and Joe pointed that out, he was like, once you see this big pine tree and it's the only one that stands out that high up, that's kind of what you sight, right? To get
right.
over
Yeah.
to over to the red buoy. And then they weren't very strict. It
No.
didn't look like on on the red buoy being on your right. And then that's something that they talked about in the pre-race kind of talk. So
Yeah, which was kind of I think probably good. There's a lot of first timers at this race, and so for them to really enforce that, I think would be really hard. I mean, and if you go too far to the right, you're gonna be in the that grass
yeah,
that which is
yeah,
just
yeah,
you look like someone from the Blue Lagoon when you get
yeah,
out of there because it just is thick. So, yeah, they were pretty generous, which was
yeah.
great.
Um, the other thing I wasn't expecting, I guess, I mean, I knew that it was going to be there, but that really steep ramp to get back up to the transition area, yeah, that was it. Usually, I'm running, out of the swim, and a slow jog or run, whatever. But yeah, I was able to get my heart rate down a little bit. Even it wasn't super high, but get the heart rate down a little bit. You walk up the ramp. And then for me, my transition was just a couple of rows from the swim in. So it was easy for me to find my bike, but it's such a huge transition area that if you're like more towards the bike out, it's like you've got a really long way to get to your rack, short way from your rack to the bike out. But it was um yeah, it was just such a long transition for me. I'm usually like in and out in 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, and it took me, I think,
Yeah,
6 minutes to get out of transition.
yeah. And
So,
that was pretty close to mine, and I am slow at transitions anyway, but so
yeah,
this it adds
yeah,
another layer, but,
yeah,
you know, that's on
yeah.
me.
Same here, and I was saying, again, before we jumped on the podcast, like, I need to add a couple of races to kinda, like, clean up my transition, and my transition is relatively clean. It's I had the wetsuit strippers, take my
Yep,
wetsuit off. But first thing I do, it's like shoes on, no socks with my triathlon shoes on, helmet on, sunglasses on, and then grab my bike and I go and that's pretty standard for me. But this time around I was like, did I grab all my nutrition? Is my water bottle on? Is my computer? It was not as clean as I had hoped. Um Now I do want to get into the bike ride just a tiny bit because the bike ride is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful bike rides. And I've done Lake Stevens 70.3, just a little bit north of
Yep.
Seattle.
Yep.
I've done Washington 70.3 down in Tri Cities and Richland. Um, and then now Oregon 70.3. And still, even though I think I said earlier, Vineman 70.3 is my favorite race, these three bike courses are my favorite. Like, just the roads are lined with trees. Yes, not the roads aren't in the best condition, but they did repave a lot of the roads, it looked like. So that was a
Definitely.
big plus. Yeah, that was a big
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah.
And
They,
for the most part, the road is closed, right, to cars. So
right.
that was really nice. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and it's just a gorgeous ride, and I never really get tired of it, and then that canopy when you come back in, and you're probably maybe 6 miles out, and you just
right.
have a really nice shaded canopy for
Yeah,
almost all the way in,
yeah,
for the
yeah,
most part, so it is
yeah.
just, it is a gorgeous ride, and, it's got that little hill under that 3rd trestle at, what, mile
Right,
11 or so,
right, right.
and, it makes people honest, and then, I'm
Yeah,
like, "Oh, make sure you gear down or, ride the course," but but other than and even that's fun. It's
yeah,
just there's not a bad part to it, really.
yeah. I think one of the things that Joe pointed out as we're having beers, waiting for people to finish, he was looking at your time and he goes, "Oh, she had an awesome bike split this year." And potentially it could have been due to you kind of starting closer to the front on the swim and not having as many people. And I experienced the same thing at Washington. I kind of started, in my normal corral. And then I ended up having to like jump, leapfrog a bunch of people. So that was part of the reason why I kind of burned my legs a little bit too early. And but this time around, I mean, there were still people obviously on the course before I was, but it was a lot easier to kind of jump, leapfrog through all those groups.
Yeah. Yeah, because I would agree. I mean, that's another consideration to really trying to, seed your I mean, if you're like we're comparable swimmers, starting more up front because 'cause we're not gonna hold anybody up,
Yeah,
especially in the
yeah,
river. I mean, if you're
right.
doing, 19 minutes, we're not gonna be in your way,
No,
but,
right.
I'm not anyway,
Yeah,
but and that is to just get a little cleaner, bike ride in,
right, right.
so
Yeah,
because, there's a lot of fast swimmers even in this, and sometimes folks biking isn't quite as strong
that's
as
strong.
maybe the run, and so you get
Yeah,
kinda caught
yeah,
between people
yeah,
or
yeah.
behind people because
Right,
it's only a single lane road each way, so there's not
right,
a lot of room to always pass safely, so
right, right.
but, yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I think the roads for the most part were pretty clean. There were still a couple of bumps, which they marked very, very well.
Mhm.
Um, Around mile 20, I there was a guy that I was kind of jockeying back and forth with for probably 5 or 6 miles. And he had a disc wheel in his rear wheel. And he rolls up to me for one last time and he goes, "Hey man, can you check to see if I've got a flat tire?" And obviously this is a discussion that we're having at 22, 23 miles an hour, right? And I look over and I'm like, "Yeah, man, you've got a flat." And I was like, "Do you have everything you need?" And he's like, I think so, but I may not have the right levers to get my tire off." So I'm like, "I've got a full kit. I'm always very well prepared just in case I have a flat, and I ride tubeless, so I don't experience pinch flats. And if I do get a flat, it could either be a catastrophic like race ending flat or something that is fairly minor where, I plug the hole and then refill my air, right? In this case, this guy who's not in my age group, he's probably in his, whatever, late 20s, early 30s. We stop. I look at his tire and I'm like, "Oh man, this is going to be a challenge." I help him put the tire levers on, and it takes us a couple 2 or 3 minutes to finally get the tire out. Number one, because he was using a tubeless tire, which is really, really tight, and it's
Yeah.
meant to be that way so that you don't let the liquid that seals holes, out of the tire. But the second thing that made it even more difficult was that he had a tube in that tire. So we didn't have a whole lot of space to try to get that tire off. So we finally get it off. He puts his new tube in, but the problem was the valve stem that was on that tube was too short. And now I'm like, dude, you did not come prepared at all. So I pull my tube out and it's got a stem that was long enough to get all the way through. And I was like, all right, man, you got everything you need. I think you're gonna be okay. And I was kind of thinking 6 minutes in, race support would be on its way if for some reason, like he wasn't able to figure it out at that point. But even race support would not have had a tube with a 100 millimeter valve stem. So he would have been screwed, even if race support came and I had not helped him. But with that being said, I still had a pretty decent like bike split. I think I mentioned that Joe and I are usually pretty close. I might get him maybe by a minute or two on the bike split, and then he's got me by 15 or 20 minutes on the run. So didn't matter either way. But you're right, coming back into the town and being under that canopy of trees, it really helped me to start to transition into my run. I wasn't like pushing as hard and usually as I was, and there was a headwind kind of like on the backside of that, bike course, but it wasn't like a strong headwind, but it was enough to be like, all right, I need to pull back just a tiny bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was there because on the way out, I thought, "Wow, this is super easy and sweet." And then I turned around
Yeah.
and came back, I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that had been the case even when I rode it the weekend before. It had been windier, so I wasn't surprised, but it's like, "Oh, yeah, this has been really a nice free ride a little bit on the way out there." But
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Um,
always gonna be wind. I mean, when have we
there's always
ever ridden a race
yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's not
Yeah.
wind? I mean, it's just, and
Yeah.
thankfully sometimes because it's so warm.
Yeah, yeah, I think that helped out a little bit. I mentioned last year I started cramping around mile 52, 53 as I was starting to get into transition, and this didn't happen this time around. So I felt like my run was going to be a lot more solid. I really enjoyed the run. The run was awesome. The first mile and a half is basically the same mile and a half that we walked right towards the swim
Right.
start, and then you do 2 5-mile loops kind of around Minto Brown Park, which is awesome. I mean, most of it, again, is in the shade, like 75-80% of it is in the shade, and then you've got a couple of, like, open areas. Um, I think one of the cool things is that on my first lap around, like, there weren't very many people, it was because we had kind of started, at the front of the race, for the swim, and then as I kind of came around to the second lap of the swim, then you started to see all of these people, and that was really cool. But there weren't a whole lot of spectators, and I wish, that if I could wish anything, of this race is that it would have been cool to see more spectators, but it is a long walk out there, and you can't have spectators, I guess, out on that strip of, from the transition area all the way into the swim start.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know if there's
So
any other way. Would there be any other, like, route for spectators to get there?
no, I mean, they'd really from the carousel area or the
Right.
event venue, you'd have to walk on the
Right.
course, and they won't let you do that to get down to that
Yeah.
long sunny strip, so which,
Right,
is
right, right.
totally understandable. I guess the only
Yeah.
other way you could do it would be to drive into, Minto Park off of River Road, but then they've got the bikes coming
Uh,
in and a lot of bike traffic, so,
okay,
um
okay.
and I think people can get some speed on that road, so I think they really encourage, people to just try and stay in
Yeah,
the venue
yeah,
to cheer.
okay. I
Although you
mean, there
could take
were some
your
people
bike.
out there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. I
Especially
do
as the
like
one got
the
longer.
yes, yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. I do like the last a half mile of the race where you see the bridge and then, you kind of go over the bridge and then the finisher chute. I think that's really cool. Washington 70.3 kind of had a similar setup, but there wasn't a bridge or anything. It was just kind of a walking path, and then you get to
Yeah.
the finish line area. I like this because you see the bridge, you go over the bridge, get some really cool shots from the photographer, and then you're in the finisher chute, which I was like, where is it? Because you kind of have to, maneuver around a little bit.
Yeah, it is a great finish. They've just each year it just has gotten better and better. I mean, it was good to start with, but it's a pretty spectacular race.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I think we've both done quite a few to to be able to appreciate a well organized and
for
great
sure,
volunteers
for sure. Well,
event.
I know we only have a few minutes left. I did want to get into Kona a little bit, and your preparation for Kona. Obviously, I want to do another podcast with you and bring you back to tell us about how that experience was. But um, which race did you qualify at to get to your Kona slot?
Ironman Arizona. So and it
Very
was the
cool. The last
last year
one.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and it
Right.
had
Right.
actually been my first full Ironman, so I was like, this
Wow.
this will be
That's
fun
awesome.
to, finish it out
Yeah.
with this, just go down there and
Yeah.
hang.
Yeah.
So so
So
it was pretty cool.
is your mindset now after Oregon 70.3? It's all focused on Kona at this point, training wise.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the focus. I'm gonna go down and do Ironman Reading, which sounds
Okay.
crazy
Okay.
in August here, but it
Yeah.
really is kind of a heat training
It
piece.
is. Yeah, for sure.
Even though it's a dry heat,
Yeah. And
it'll
hilly.
it
And hilly,
and
right?
hilly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. So it really
Yeah.
is, and I think for me, a lot of it is the heat preparation and getting
Right.
ready for Kona. I've done it before, and I'd done the Hawaii 70.3, which is just a beautiful race.
Yeah. I
But
want to
it
do that
is,
next year. Yeah.
yeah, it's oh my gosh, it's very very fun,
Yeah.
and very humid because you're running on the golf
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
So you're like, or
Yeah. I
most
bet.
of it's on the golf course.
Yeah.
So I kind of I've had experiences there in Hawaii and know really that I do need to, as hard as it is for me to think, "Oh, I'm gonna go out for a mid-afternoon run when it's, 90 degrees." It is what
Yeah.
I need to do. You
Yeah.
just can't
With a
show up as
100%
an
humidity.
Oregonian. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and
For sure.
expect to do well. So, it's part of the adventure, that's
Yeah.
for
For
sure.
sure. Yeah. Really cool. I was just talking to a buddy yesterday about what my next 70.3 is. And I was talking to my wife and I'm like, I've had Hawaii on my bucket list for the longest time. I need to do Hawaii. And so that most likely will be my next one. And then I do, like I said, I think I do need to get a race in before that. And then I may come back and either do Oregon or Washington next year. I feel like I need to come back to both of those races or one of those races because now that I know what the course is like and what the conditions are, now I can, really put the kind of effort that I need to, have a good time. And, I don't know if I still have the potential to get to world championships or not. It's a long way there. But if I can get fit enough, maybe I can get a roll down spot. We'll see.
No, I mean, their motto is what anything is possible. And it
Yeah.
really is
Yeah.
about being, persistent and just, enjoying it as it comes and and not uh not getting in your head about it sometimes, which is hard. It's
Yeah.
just that extra pressure we all put on. Because I think we
It
probably
is.
are a little bit all type A in some
Yeah.
way or another
Right.
in this
Right.
sport.
Right. Well, Pat, I know you got to run, and you already kind of offer that advice I was going to ask you. But if you could offer any advice to people out there that might be interested in getting into the sport of triathlon, and for you, I mean, that was a little bit later, right? Like in your 50s. So it's never too late to start, right? What piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice would you give people out there if they want to get into our sport.
Yeah. I think it is for me, it's been in what I have, sometimes suggested to others is, find a group of like-minded people and, we are all out there. Most cities or locations have groups of folks that do triathlons or, friends that maybe you can run with or bike with or swim with. And I think for me, it's been the community that's kind of kept me in it and kept me very
Absolutely.
interested in it. It's been the friendships. It's been the sharing of experience
Yeah.
and not thinking that I have to do it all myself
Yeah,
and that every
absolutely.
day has to be a perfect training day. It's you kind of learn some grace with it. I think when you have a community and you have others that you can um, share the experience with, along with your family, it's you know it's
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
it's really it's a very supportive environment and a very welcoming environment. I mean at 50 when I started doing this, I really, you kind of have your own thoughts of who you are in your head and how you fit in or don't fit in.
Right,
And
right.
so that was that some of those thoughts I had were very pleasantly things that I just didn't experience. And so it's been a very good journey. I don't think it's over by any means. I think about things differently now that I'm older, than when I did when I first started this, but it's, takes a little longer to recover. That's probably the biggest part.
Yeah, 100%, and I talk about the recovery piece and, some of the episodes, and as I've gotten older as an athlete, as a triathlete, I've really emphasized and focused on the recovery piece of it, making sure that I am getting, recovery time in between hard workouts and doing the right things. But I really like what you said about the community piece of it. I definitely think I was very involved with the community earlier on, and still involved with the community even now, but not as involved. And I really think that um, that is the thing that kind of keeps us all uh, in this sport. I mean, it's one thing to have all these like personal achievements and getting a Kona. I mean that's all great, but if it weren't for the community, I don't know if I would have come back because I took a hiatus away from the sport. I think it was like 7 years from my last 70.3 to Washington last year, and then when I came back and I'm like, yeah, this is I've been missing out on a lot, right? And a lot of it is the community. The kid I ended up or the guy that I ended up helping out during the bike course, all I could think about was somebody helping me out the year before on the bike course at Washington and just paying it back, right? Even though it took 6 or 7 minutes off of my time, it was like, I owe this to the sport. It's given me way more than I've given it, and I wanna leave the sport better than I found it, and I think that's the legacy that we get to pass on, right? As we kind of, move forward, even though we've got our own personal goals and we wanna chase, PRs and stuff, it's still I feel like the most important part
Yeah,
in the sport.
I would agree. I would agree. That's a great mindset for sure.
Yeah. Well, Pat, again, I know you gotta run, but thank you so much for
Yeah,
jumping on. Um, guys, I do wanna say that, this sport isn't easy, but if you can surround yourself with, like Pat said, like-minded people and a great community, you're gonna have a lot of fun doing triathlons, and maybe you never get to the 70.3 or the Ironman distance, but the sport of triathlon it saved my life. I know that for sure. I probably would have been doing a lot of other things and maybe playing more golf, but I do feel like triathlon is one of the things that changed my perspective on things, made me a lot more empathetic towards myself, and other people. So if you guys want to give triathlon a shot, uh, reach out to your local tri club or somebody that has been doing it for a while, like Pat and I, or Joe, and yeah, take the first step. So, guys, Appreciate you tuning in to the Long Game podcast, and we'll see you next time.